Today, I really want to talk about kind of an interesting concept that I learned about recently called psychogeography. Um, it's an idea that goes really beyond mere architecture and construction. And I'll explain as I go through how this fits into the idea of housing and affordable housing. But I really want people to understand it. It's a new concept, and it's not really new. It's not new at all, but it is new to me and certainly new to lots of other people. And this concept called psychogeography, well, the term might sound kind of academic. Its implications are profound, practical, emotional, and above all, they're really quite human. In my quest to find affordable housing solutions, I often neglect the soul. We, as people involved in housing, often neglect the soul of a community, the intangible aura that kind of transform houses into homes and neighborhoods into nurturing communities. Psychogeography offers a lens through which we can reimagine our living spaces. It focuses not just on how quickly we can erect structures, but also on how these spaces make us feel, act, and interact. It urges us to consider whether a simple walk from our home to a communal garden can be transformed into a journey filled with emotional and sensory experiences. Imagine kind of like curated pathways meandering between homes, guiding residents past small art installations, aromatic plants, and seating areas that invite contemplation or conversation. These are not mere decorative touches. They are like conduits for emotional well-being, sparking joy, curiosity, and a true sense of community. Imagine you're walking with your phone and there's a QR code embedded along these paths that tells stories or provide historical context, connecting people to the spaces they call home, not just physically, but emotionally. In our fast-paced world, where the virtues of speed and efficiency are extolled by everybody, psychogeography invites us to slow down and engage deeply with our surroundings, even in compact, modular housing settings, where space is a luxury. Psychogeography challenges us to think vertically and digitally. Rooftop gardens interconnected by walkways can become oases of calm, and augmented reality can overlay our physical spaces with layers of meaning, transforming them into arenas of art and storytelling. By integrating psychogeography into our housing models, we do more than offer a roof over someone's head. We offer a space where life unfolds in all its emotional richness, a space that respects the human need for connection, fosters community bonds, and enriches the daily rituals of living. Really, people, as someone deeply committed to rethinking housing, I am excited by the possibilities that psychogeography presents. It encourages us to create not just houses, but homes that resonate with our emotional and psychological frequencies. It encourages us to build not just communities, but sanctuaries of shared human experience. And in reality, this can be done very inexpensively and be integrated directly into affordable housing projects, especially low-rise modular housing, or ADUs, or small communities with, for example, 6 or 8 or 10 housing units in one community. And building communities in the spaces around us, even outside of the urban or on the edges of the existing urban landscape, can provide the space to bring this type of true emotional experience and shared human experience directly to everyone. Now, today I'm going to I'm going to continue an interview from last week, which I'll do right now. And then after that, I am going to then continue with talking more about and some of the detail about psychogeography and how it might be integrated into our whole system. And now I want to bring you the conclusion of last week's interview with Jane. I had to, unfortunately, abruptly interrupt her just in order to fit in my 1-hour time slot. So I apologize to Jane and to the audience for doing that. And I am going to conclude the rest of her interview now. Thank you very much, Jane.
Talk about prevention, like the idea. Do you have any ideas on, like, what do you think would help to make it so that in our society we can better help people to kind of maybe work on preventing some of these systemic problems that arise and create the homeless problem?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that is really the key, actually, because I think we can address issues as they come up all the time, but unless we actually get to the source of things, we're always going to have this problem. So, I mean, one thing I would say is I think we need support for families, like right from the get-go, young families, the social supports that are needed for families for families who are at risk, basically. For infants and toddlers. In the education field, I sometimes see children coming in who clearly have some challenges and have had no support. They've had no occupational therapy, no speech, no diagnosis of any kind, and we're missing a really key time there where we could really have an impact. But beyond that, actually, just mental health support and just support in raising children and all of those things and having good food and shelter, all of those things. So early support for families at risk. And then the second thing I would say is education. We are in an education crisis, and I'm not really sure if the general public really knows how bad it is. It is. I feel like educators are in a situation where class sizes are way too large, needs are too extreme, and there's a lot of behavior, and we are just lacking the support, and it just seems like there's never enough. And so, for example, several years ago now, quite a few years ago, the government was all about inclusion, and that sounded really great, and there are parts of that are really great, but in doing so, we have all children in the same class. What the government didn't say is that there would be very little support given. And so in those situations, I just feel like if there was the proper early intervention with the children who need extra help, we could prevent so many problems. And I can speak to that a little bit personally, too, because I really do have a personal perspective on this. I have one of my kids has a learning disability, and it's quite a severe one. And we could see that he was not going to get the help that he needed in the education system. So we luckily were able to do all the things necessary outside of school to support him and work through all of this. But I look at kids every day that are like him, and because they're not in the family that has the wherewithal to be able to provide all that support. And that support was very costly and very timely. Very, it was a ton of time, a ton of money, I guess I should say, right? So it's not accessible to everybody, and it should be. I mean, that's a basic human right to be able to succeed in education. So I look at that, and then I see students who are falling through the cracks, and I'm looking at their trajectory, and I see them in older grades, and there's a lot of behavior. And of course there is. I mean, when you're not doing well, you do start to you can start to act out and seek other ways to get attention, and to also draw attention away from the fact that you don't feel very good in school. And then you look further down the line, and what happens to these children? Do they drop out of high school? Do they go with the wrong crowd? Do they end up in jail? Do they end up on the street? So all of those things are completely preventable if they had the support that they needed so to alleviate some of these problems in the first place. So I really think that money has to go into education. We need to clean this up. It is a mess right now. And then thirdly, I would say healthcare. The same thing that's happening in education is happening in healthcare as well. It's definitely eroding, and I think that the mental health supports in particular aren't there. When we look at the wait times for people who are seeking mental health support, and they're months and months long to see anybody, it doesn't make any sense. And so until we, not only mental health, but really anything that's wrong with you, it would take forever to see somebody. It's just so problematic on so many levels, and the repercussions of all of that, of course, are far stretching. Like, I don't even know. So I just think if we're not fixing all of that, then this homelessness crisis that we're in, I don't see it ever being alleviated unless we start putting money in these, like I said, in the family, in education, in healthcare.
So I agree 150 million% with all of those things. And what always comes to my mind is that it is, and I don't know if you've ever heard of Mike Harris. Mike Harris was
might have heard of him.
He was the Premier of Ontario, and I remember him saying, if elected, I'm going to run Ontario like a business and, reduce your taxes. Because at the time, he was one of the first politicians, really, who emphasized the need or created the desire in people to not pay taxes or pay less in taxes. And that was the way he got elected. And so in order to do the things that you're suggesting, you can't take away from something. Well, it's a whole different thing. I do think you could take away from some things, but it would involve paying more money in taxes. How do you think yourself or other people, how do you think they would react to that? Do you think people would be willing to
No, well, not right now, not with the price of groceries and the price of houses. But then what can we do about that? I mean, it's just, there's so many layers, and where did it all go wrong? Like I don't know, but it does, definitely people are not going to right now say, oh yeah, like let's get taxed more so we can pay for more things, but it's got to come from somewhere. And why can't we look at countries who are actually doing this right? What have they done differently? And I don't know, like I haven't researched that, but we do know that the countries who are doing it right are the ones that are investing in these key areas. So what are they doing?
Well, one thing is that every single study that's been done on education and population points or tells the story that the better education available to people and the more education people have, the better the society is. And the bottom line is the countries that do provide, like, for example, better educational support, better supports like this, people pay higher taxes, and they realize that they're contributing to the success of everyone, and not just worrying about themselves. But this is a whole nother conversation, and I want to, at least at this moment, maybe another time we'll continue this one, but I want to just emphasize those three things that you talked about, because it all does relate to housing, which is first off, well, you tell me, what were the three things? Healthcare? What were the other two?
It was healthcare, education, and then the early support for families, like family support.
Right. Yeah. And I would even take that family support and go back one step, which is to teach people who, before they have families, as to what it means, and how do you have a family, and what does it mean to be a parent. And it's not.
That's
I find
very
today,
true. Good point. Yes.
Yeah. I find today
I
people. Yeah, it seems to me now people, even when they're having children, they just think, well, I'm just going to have a child and then throw it to school, and everybody else got to look after it. So, rather they don't seem to. But that's me personally, and that's the way it is. Anyway, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
And that finishes Jane's interview. Thank you very much, Jane. It's, her personal interactions and her personal experience with the homeless is really wonderful to hear that emotional expression there. Thank you very much, Jane. Really appreciate that interview. And now I would like to get back to talking about psychogeography. And the first thing I want to really do is talk a little bit about what it really is. So psychogeography is a concept that originated in the 1950s, primarily linked to what was called the situationalist international movement. What it did was it explores the emotional and psychological impact that the urban environment has on individuals. So, the idea is to examine how architecture, layout, and other kind of spatial elements kind of influence our moods, behaviors, and perceptions. It was a fellow Guy Debord, I hope I'm saying his name right. He was a key figure in the movement, and he introduced concepts like the dérive, which is an unplanned journey through an urban landscape to experience it in a new way. Psychogeography evolved over time and is now employed in various disciplines, including urban planning, sociology, and art. It often involves techniques like mental mapping, where people draw maps from memory to capture their emotional states tied to particular places. For example, I did that using Google Maps many years ago. As a young person, we moved a fair bit, really almost every 2 years. And so one time, whenever it was, I decided, I have to make a map. I found out that Google Maps allows you to create your own map. So what I did was I created a map that outlined all of the different houses or places that my family lived while I was growing up. Really, I brought it right up to the present at the moment that I did that map. And then it was very, very interesting, and it brought a lot of emotional content to the forefront in talking in my mind, in trying to think about what was it like at each of those locations. How did I interact with people? What grade was I in school? Where did I go? Like, for example, one of my brothers told me, well, when we lived at that place, because I was kind of a surprise, my older brothers who are, more than 10 years older than I am, They once put me, when I was 2 years old, in a shopping cart and tried to roll me down a hill to get rid of me. So, I mean, I don't remember the incident at all. My brother closest to me in age told me this story many years ago, and but it's very much tied in my mind now to the experience of living in that area. And when I think of it, I can think of the hill and the surroundings, the buildings. It was near a ravine that's right at Bloor Street, or sorry, St. St. Clair and Yonge in Toronto. So while living at that same place, our backyard was a parking lot. So for me, again, as a 2 or 3-year-old, I remember being out there in the snow. They would plow the snow up. We would dig holes and remember that area very much just by that, the geography of that area. And the last personal anecdote will be, again, in the same place. I remember walking with my mother. It was near the Yonge subway, and we didn't have our own washer and dryer. We had to take one of those bundle buggies full of laundry, take it to the subway, go down the subway stairs. I would hold her hand. She'd have the bundle buggy, and we'd go and make our way by subway to a laundromat. So for me, this is really what psychogeography is really all about, is invoking that type of mental image, that mapping. So with that, with my own interest in housing and urban planning, psychogeography really can provide me with a valuable insight into how design and arrangement of the housing that I want to build and the housing that I would like to see built to provide affordable housing, and how those housing solutions could possibly impact the well-being of the residents that actually live in the buildings. Another part of psychogeographic thinking is about trails or walks. These are routes designated to encourage people to engage differently with their environment, really challenging the unusual, perhaps utilitarian path they might take. So right now in the city, regularly there's lots of walking paths in the urban environment. In Peterborough is really very well, there's all sorts of these very nice, even green paths, etc., that are available to walk on. But by creating those types of path planners and by creating psychogeographic paths, what you do is the trails are planned with where artists aim to stimulate a deeper emotional and psychological connection with the urban landscape. Participants in these type of psychogeographic walks often experience the city in a more spontaneous and reflective way, as opposed to simply navigating through it. I can imagine designing neighborhoods with psychogeographic trails that not only serve as functional pathways, but also really work to enrich the lives of residents by encouraging mindfulness, exploration, and a stronger sense of community. I really believe that housing is a human right, and I believe in innovating in the construction industry by incorporating these sorts of things into the design elements, and that would really create a very positive ethos by having that type of psychogeographic nature of a walkway. some kind of real life examples of this would be like a curated pathway, where you could design a pathway that intentionally meanders through communal green spaces rather than providing the shortest distance between 2 points. But they do provide that. So it's not just a walk in the woods where you really are just in the woods, but it also can be combined to be utilitarian, meaning it gets you from A to B, but does it in a way that is not simply providing the shortest distance between 2 points. This type of pathway could incorporate features like small art installations, communal seating, or even little free libraries to encourage interaction and reflection. If you know what I mean by the free libraries, it's almost like a mailbox, but a big mailbox that might be 2 feet by 3 feet sitting on a post, and then people put a book, and it's like, take a book, put a book, take a book. Recently, during a visit to Los Angeles, I was at Venice Beach, and then the Venice community. I didn't even know there was. I've heard of Venice Beach, but who knows, there was actually a Venice there that was a recreation of the Venice in Italy. So in that, there are some very beautiful examples of small housing and very creative housing. And one of the places had, right on the water, one of these little libraries. Then the second thing really that comes to mind is to create storytelling elements. So a storytelling element, you could, what I'm imagining is that people nowadays, everybody's carrying their phone with them. So what you could do is just on a post, even in that meandering walk, or you could even do it on a regular walk. It doesn't matter. It could be just on a telephone pole on the sidewalk, and you could embed a QR code or other markers along the trail that the people walking it, or the residents in particular, if you build this into a community, can scan with their smartphones. These could provide historic context, share stories from the community, or offer kind of like mindfulness exercises to engage residents mentally and emotionally. Then another thing is to also build in sensory engagement. So that's actually physical sensory engagement by using different materials for the pathway or areas of the community space to engage multiple senses. For example, have gravel paths, wooden walkways, and smooth tarmac or concrete walkways or paved walkways. Each one can provide a different tactile experience. You could also could build into the community aromatic plants to engage the sense of smell. So as you walk, if you can imagine, the path changes from gravel to concrete to paved. And it might not seem like much, but if you imagine you're doing that, then your body is actually getting a whole different sensory engagement in this simple, affordable housing area. But now, through some very basic things, you get a whole different experience. And the fourth thing really is to provide community input, really to make the whole thing resonate more with residents. You could allow the residents to contribute to the design process. Of course, with all of these other things, the residents would provide the ideas for the sensory engagement, what smells to put, what stories to tell, what pathways to design, what art to put in place. So getting that community input would be invaluable. The community engagement will give residents a real sense of ownership and perhaps even align with that then really aligns with my own heartfelt need of making housing accessible and resonate with people's real needs. And again, I hate to stick to money, but these things are really, truly inexpensive to implement. Now, one of the challenges in my mind, especially with affordable housing complexes, is the space, right? Like everybody's home there isn't an acre of ground around everybody's home or a giant park or something like that. So sometimes with these psychogeographic elements, it seems like they're too big to be included in, especially in an affordable housing community. So I have some ideas on how that can be incorporated even into small communities. Like I've often thought, and I've actually developed designs for communities where you might have, and I talked about it a little bit earlier, you might have 10, 6, 12, 20 small housing units grouped together, perhaps in a circle, perhaps in a square, whatever it is, some sort of formation. And those 20 housing units, each, housing an individual or an individual family or small group. And so that creates its own community. And it all is done in a pretty small space. But here's some ideas on how to incorporate these psychogeographic elements in smaller environments. Like you can have a micro garden. So instead of sprawling green spaces, you could just create small communal micro gardens, such as a herb garden between the homes, or a winding path through the smaller spaces could still offer the residents a sense of discovery and serenity. Then move from the horizontal to the vertical. Create vertical elements. If horizontal space is at a premium, go vertical. Wall-mounted art, QR codes with storytelling elements, or vertical gardens can engage residents without taking up much space, horizontal ground space. The other idea is multifunctional spaces. So a small communal area can serve multiple purposes. For instance, a single plaza could incorporate seating that also serves as storage or planters. And it could feature a tiny stage, I love that idea, for community events or for open mic nights or for discussions or outdoor movie nights. Then one of the really interesting things that's available that can be done is digital augmentation. If the physical space is really tight, it can be augmenting, or we could augment the experience digitally using augmented reality apps that could allow the residents to experience storytelling elements or historic tidbits like we talked about right on their smartphones as they walk. Or, as I'll talk about in another couple of minutes here, they could have an augmented reality headset. Now, this is more money for sure, but perhaps as a community, we could in each community, buy a couple of them and then lend them out or have them available on a use as you walk basis or something like that. But that also is something that would be available, but also much of the augmented reality world is available right on your phone. So you can just hold your phone up to a place and you can see what's there in front of you, or see it replaced with something that is augmented, added to it. So the last thing that's on my mind is what I would call tactical urbanism. It's kind of like employing easily changeable elements like chalk art, temporary signs, or movable planters that residents can engage with in different ways depending on the day or the event. So in other words, you just have things that can be easily moved around, temporary signs. The planters are movable, that can be easily moved and meant to be moved. So even in a compact environment, well-designed pathways and community spaces can encourage people to explore and really interact, really fulfilling some of the key objectives of psychogeography by doing that. And with my focus on efficient construction methods, modular, fast, quick, straightforward, affordable housing, these flexible, multi-purpose kind of solutions really align with, my overall view of how communities could be built. Now, one of the things that I really wanted to talk about also was the idea. So in one of my own concepts for affordable housing, I see, if you can imagine, like a circle of houses or a rectangle of single-story, studio and one-bedroom houses that are close together, meaning not like single family on a 50-foot wide lot, but they're more of a community style housing where they might all be in a circle and then have space created. But it becomes a small space because if each home is, say, only 700 square feet, then and you put them all together in one small area, so the ability to kind of walk around and create this psychogeographic space is much more difficult. So one of the things that occurred to me, which I would really like to explore at some point, from a construction and buildability point of view, is the idea of having using the rooftops of all of these buildings, so have them with a flat roof and have a green garden, a green roof. So the roof becomes grass or a garden or whatever. If it's 700 square feet of living space below, then on the roof you've got about 700 square feet, which is a pretty substantial amount. If you're going to do a real garden, that would be enough garden to feed, a number of people if you worked it properly. But instead, or as also, what you could, if you had this community with, say, 10 units of these modular or tiny homes, but kind of medium-sized homes, all in a circle around of each other. But then what you do is you have a walkway up to the roof, and then you create walkways on the rooftops, walking across from one to the other, and they're connected using almost a bridge element between the different housing dwellings. And then somebody could go up the stairs, or you'd want to have a lift as well, so it would be accessible. And then you get up to that top of the roof, and then you can create a whole different space on top of each roof. And instead of having to be concerned about how you can fit in this walkway or this art installation or whatever it is around the buildings that are there, you create them instead on top of them. So like a rooftop walkway connecting individual tiny homes would serve as a functional and really quite an experimental element. Each roof could have its own small garden, or even a relaxation space, adding another layer of community and personalization to the living environment. Imagine Imagine, imagine the residents taking a leisurely stroll from one rooftop to another, each space offering kind of a different sensory experience. I really love this concept. I'm hopeful that really can make it happen, like a lavender garden on one, a small Zen rock garden on another, or even a rooftop dedicated to community yoga or meditation, or even maybe an outdoor space for movies, meditation sessions. And as the structures themselves would have to be reinforced to allow the walking on the roof, and sound insulation so the people downstairs aren't interfered with. But I think that it's really kind of an interesting thing that really would be fun and has some possibilities. I mean, I like flat roofs, and I like the idea of being able to use that space. So the other thing that could be added to just add a whole nother layer to it is augmented reality. With people don't necessarily have to walk around much with it with AR. It's true, it's kind of right there. But the AR itself could serve as an enhancement for those who do walk around. For example, as they stroll through the rooftop gardens, they could point their phones at specific plants to learn about their medicinal or culinary uses. Or maybe they encounter digital art pieces that can only be seen through an AR app, turning a regular walk into an art tour. When this idea came to me, I thought, wow, wouldn't that be fantastic? So you can walk from roof to roof, and ideally you'd wear augmented reality glasses, since it's easier to handle than carrying your phone with you. And then as you turn your head and look in one particular place, you would see different art installations as you walk. And they could be done by the residents themselves, or you could encourage other artists, local artists, to integrate their art into that digital world. This way, this affordable housing system this solution could become a whole holistic living experience. This could be a phenomenal way to demonstrate that efficient, cost-effective housing doesn't have to sacrifice quality of life or community engagement. I must say I'm very excited about learning about psychogeography, and then in my mind trying to incorporate it into housing design, affordable housing design. It's really a fantastic way to easily, so the construction of the building can be, more like one of the secrets really to making housing affordable, and especially when it comes to making modular housing affordable, is repeatability. So repeatability, the challenge with it can be sometimes with that it might all look the same, and people are not attracted to that. So the integration of psychogeography and some of these elements really allows that to be overcome easily. So, for example, I just want to kind of review some of the key elements of this, like some of the things that could be incorporated into these communities. Curated pathways, storytelling elements, sensory engagement, and community input. So curated pathways, like walkways designed to engage people instead of straight, boring sidewalks. Think about paths that meander around communal spaces and possibly feature art exhibits or small seating areas, or tiny libraries, or exercise equipment for as you walk. And then I saw this as a child in a place along the highway going up north to Barrie. There was a restaurant that had this pathway you could walk through, and they had like different exercise stations in the pathway. And then storytelling elements. You can incorporate a QR code and embedded screens that residents can scan to uncover interesting historic facts, anecdotes, stories related to the community. Then with the sensory engagement, utilize materials like gravel, cobblestone, plants, just to create different sensory experiences as you move through the space. And then community input involving residents in the initial and subsequent design phases can instill a sense of ownership and attachment to the community. One of the problems that I talked about also was that if in these communities, I'm imagining them be smaller spaces, right? So how do you deal with that? Again, just to reiterate, micro gardens, vertical elements, multiple functional spaces, and digital augmentation. So like small communal gardens, go vertical instead of horizontal. Make a green wall on the side of a building, or an art installation on the side of a building, the side that doesn't have any windows, for example. Or if you have two tiny homes that are close together, you put the walls that have no windows facing each other, and then you use those walls for vertical gardens or for art installations, and then people can walk between them to really get a sense of that. Multiple functional spaces. Given space constraints, areas can be, designated to serve multiple functions, like a communal patio or open air cinema at night. And digital augmentation, one of my favorite things, augmented reality, can add layers of experience without consuming physical space, like virtual art installations or historical markers. Now, the last thing is I just want to talk about one more time, which is the whole idea of connecting rooftops. This is something just dawned on me when I was learning about psychogeography. And I just thought, wow, because I like flat roofs. I can see a community of 10 or 12 or even 20 or 30 tiny homes all together, and then you create a walkway between the roofs that people can walk and then have different experiences at different parts of the walkway. I really like that idea. It involves certainly more challenging engineering and environmental things, but it, in my mind, seems quite possible. Now, there certainly are technical requirements for all of this: hardware, software, connectivity. Curating the art. Could find local artists, thematic exhibits. The user experience, interactive elements, like what does that mean, information layers, navigation, all of these things, there certainly creates a whole new part of all of this. But again, I think that's all quite doable, and it could create something like really quite good. Anyway, that is the end of our program for today. I wanted to thank you, everybody, for listening. And next week we'll have some more interviews, and I really appreciate your time. And this is Stephen Haylestrom, and this is Let's Talk Housing. And thank you very much for listening. Take care. Oh, sorry. This is Trent Radio 92.7 in Peterborough, Ontario. And it's also on podcast on all the podcast places. Just look up Let's Talk Housing with Stephen Haylestrom. Thank you.